The stagecoach robbery happened so fast that Amelia Laurent barely had time to scream before rough hands dragged her from the compartment into the blazing California sun. She stumbled onto the dusty road outside Hangtown in the summer of 1872, her traveling dress catching on the wooden steps as three masked men rifled through her belongings with practiced efficiency. The driver lay motionless in his seat, blood seeping from a wound on his head, and the other passengers huddled together in terrified silence. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs as the tallest outlaw grabbed her small carpetbag and dumped its contents onto the ground, her carefully folded clothes mixing with the dirt of the Sierra Nevada foothills. "Please," she whispered, watching her mother's silver locket roll across the road. "That's all I have left of her." The outlaw kicked it aside with his boot, laughing as he pocketed her small purse containing the last of her traveling money. Amelia felt tears burn her eyes but refused to let them fall. She had come too far to break now. From Boston to California, crossing half a continent to start fresh after her father's death had left her penniless and alone at 22. The teaching position waiting for her in Hangtown was supposed to be her salvation, her chance to rebuild a life from the ruins of everything she had known. A gunshot split the air, and Amelia flinched as all three outlaws whirled toward the sound. A rider appeared on the ridge above them, silhouetted against the cloudless sky, his horse kicking up dust as he descended at a reckless pace. He wore a weathered brown hat pulled low, a dark shirt, and dusty denim pants, with a revolver already drawn and aimed at the men surrounding the stagecoach. "Step away from the coach," the rider called out, his voice carrying authority despite the distance. "Step away now, and you might walk out of here." The tallest outlaw raised his own weapon, but the rider was faster. A second shot rang out, sending the gun flying from the outlaw's hand with a pained yelp. The other two men scrambled for their horses, clearly deciding their haul was not worth facing down an armed man who could shoot like that. Within seconds, all three were riding hard toward the tree line, abandoning the scattered belongings and wounded pride. The rider approached slowly, holstering his weapon as he dismounted. Amelia got her first clear look at him as he bent to retrieve her mother's locket from the dirt. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His face was angular and strong, with a shadow of stubble along his jaw and eyes the color of summer sage that held both kindness and something harder, something forged by this unforgiving land. "Madam," he said quietly, holding out the locket, "I believe this belongs to you." Amelia reached for it with trembling fingers, clutching the silver against her chest. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you had not come along." "Nothing good," he admitted, his gaze sweeping over the other passengers who were beginning to emerge from their shock. He checked on the driver, examining the wound with gentle hands, before declaring it looked worse than it was. "Name's Tobias Turner. I work for the Wells Fargo office in Hangtown. We have been tracking these men for 3 weeks now." "Amelia Laurent," she managed, watching as he gathered her scattered belongings with surprising care for a man whose hands looked calloused and work-worn. "I'm the new schoolteacher, or I was supposed to be if I ever make it there." Something shifted in his expression, a softness entering those sage eyes. "You will make it. We are only about 5 miles out. Driver should be able to get you there once he gets his bearings back." He handed her the carpetbag, now repacked with her clothes, though everything was hopelessly dusty. "Welcome to California, Miss Laurent. I wish your introduction had been under better circumstances." The rest of the journey into Hangtown passed in a blur. Tobias rode alongside the stagecoach, his presence a silent reassurance that kept Amelia's racing heart from completely spiraling into panic. She watched him through the window, noting the easy way he sat his horse, the constant vigilance in how his eyes scanned the landscape. This was a man who knew danger intimately, who had made peace with it in whatever way one could in a place where violence lurked behind every sun-bleached rock and twisted pine. Hangtown sprawled along a creek valley, its main street lined with wooden buildings that had sprung up during the gold rush 2 decades earlier. The town had survived the boom and bust, evolving into something more permanent, though it still carried the rough edges of its origins. Amelia counted 2 saloons, a general store, a church with a crooked steeple, a hotel that had seen better days, and various other establishments that spoke to a community trying to establish civilization in the wilderness. Tobias helped her down from the stagecoach in front of the hotel, his hand steady and warm against hers. "The schoolhouse is on the east end of town," he explained, gesturing down the dusty street. "Mrs. Patterson, she is the minister's wife. She has been maintaining the teacher's quarters. I can take you there once you have had a chance to recover from your ordeal." "I'm fine," Amelia insisted, though her legs felt unsteady beneath her skirts. "Truly, I would rather see where I'll be living and teaching." A hint of a smile crossed his face, transforming it entirely. "Stubborn. That is good. You will need that here." The teacher's quarters were attached to the one-room schoolhouse, a simple but clean space with a narrow bed, a small stove, a table with 2 chairs, and a window that looked out toward the Sierra Nevada mountains. Mrs. Patterson, a plump woman in her 50s with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands, had prepared the room with fresh linens and a vase of wildflowers on the table. "You poor dear," Mrs. Patterson fussed, after Tobias explained what had happened. "Your very first day and already such excitement. This is not the welcome we hoped to give you." "I'm grateful to be here safely," Amelia said, setting her carpetbag on the bed. "Thanks to Mr. Turner. Tobias is one of the good ones," Mrs. Patterson said warmly, patting his arm with maternal affection. "His family has been in these parts since the early days. His father runs the freight office, and his mother teaches music when she is not helping at the church." Tobias looked vaguely uncomfortable with the praise, shifting his weight. "I should report the robbery to the sheriff." "Miss Laurent, if you need anything, my family's office is just down the street. The Turner Freight Company. You cannot miss it." After he left, Mrs. Patterson helped Amelia unpack and clean up, chattering about the town and its inhabitants. There were 43 children of school age, ranging from 6 to 16, though the older boys often missed class during planting and harvest seasons. The previous teacher, an elderly man named Mr. Holbrook, had passed away in his sleep 3 months ago, and the children had been without proper instruction since then. "They are good children, mostly," Mrs. Patterson assured her. "A bit wild, perhaps, but eager to learn. You will do fine, dear. I can see you have backbone. This country requires it." That night, alone in her new quarters, Amelia lit the oil lamp and sat at the small table, trying to write a letter to her cousin in Boston. But the words would not come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those masked men, felt the terror of being dragged from the coach, heard the gunshots echoing across the valley. The darkness beyond her single window seemed absolute, pressing against the glass like a living thing. She thought of her childhood bedroom in Boston, with street lamps glowing outside and the sounds of the city at night, of people and horses and life continuing around her. Here, there was only silence and darkness so complete it felt suffocating. Coyotes howled in the distance, and something rustled in the grass outside. Every sound made her jump, her imagination transforming shadows into threats, Sleep seemed impossible. Amelia paced the small room, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the surprising chill of a California summer night at elevation. She tried to read by lamplight, but the words blurred together. She tried to pray, but her thoughts scattered like startled birds. Fear clawed at her throat, irrational and overwhelming. A soft knock at the door made her gasp. She froze, staring at the rough wooden planks, her heart in her mouth. "Miss Laurent," Tobias's voice came through, quiet and cautious. "I saw your lamp still burning. I was riding past and wanted to make sure you were all right." Relief flooded through her so intensely that her knees went weak. She opened the door to find him standing in the darkness, his horse tied to the schoolhouse railing behind him. In the lamplight spilling from her room, his face looked concerned, those sage eyes searching hers. "I could not sleep," she admitted, hating how small her voice sounded. "Everything here is so different, so dark." Understanding crossed his features. "The first nights are the hardest. The quiet gets into your head, makes you think about all the things that could be out there in the shadows. In Boston, there were always lights, always people nearby." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Here, it feels like the darkness goes on forever." Tobias glanced around, then made a decision. "May I come in? It is not entirely proper, but I promise you, my intentions are honorable. I just think maybe having someone nearby might help." Amelia knew she should refuse. Knew that propriety demanded she send him away, that allowing a man into her quarters at night would spark gossip in a town this small. But the fear pulsing through her veins overrode every rule she had been taught about proper behavior. She stepped aside, letting him enter. He left the door open a respectable few inches and pulled one of the chairs to sit near the entrance, keeping distance between them. "My mother, when she first came west with my father, she could not sleep for weeks. Said the darkness felt like it would swallow her whole. My father sat up with her every night until she got used to it." "What changed?" Amelia asked, settling into the other chair. "She started seeing the stars," Tobias said simply. "Really seeing them. Back east you get a handful on a clear night. Out here there are thousands, millions." Once she started looking up instead of into the dark, everything shifted for her. Amelia considered this. "I have never been good with the dark. Even as a child I needed a candle burning." "Nothing wrong with that," he assured her. "We all have our fears. Mine is deep water. Nearly drowned in the American River when I was 12. Even now, crossing anything deeper than a stream makes my hands shake." His admission, so honest and unguarded, made something loosen in Amelia's chest. "You are kind to tell me that, to make me feel less foolish." "You are not foolish. You are brave." He leaned forward slightly, his forearms resting on his knees. "You came across the entire country by yourself to start over. That takes more courage than most people ever manage." They talked quietly as the hours passed. Amelia telling him about Boston, about her father's bookshop and how his death from pneumonia had left her with nothing but debts and distant relatives who saw her as a burden. Tobias shared stories of growing up in Hangtown, of the town's wild early days when gold fever gripped everyone, of how his father had built a business on the foundation of reliability and hard work, while others chased quick riches that rarely materialized. "You ever think about leaving?" Amelia asked. "Going somewhere else?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But this place is in my blood now. The mountains, the way the light hits the pines in the morning, even the dust and heat. It is home in a way I cannot quite explain." As he spoke, Amelia found herself studying him more closely. The lamplight played across his features, softening the hard edges that the harsh California sun had carved. His hands, resting on his knees, were strong and scarred, the hands of someone who worked hard and did not shy from difficulty. There was something deeply steady about him, an anchor in the chaos of her disrupted world. "I should let you try to sleep," Tobias said eventually, though he made no move to rise. "Morning comes early out here, please," Amelia whispered before she could stop herself. "Could you stay just a little longer? I know it is improper, but I do not think I can face the darkness alone yet." Something flickered in his eyes, something tender and protective. "I can stay. I will stay as long as you need." She felt tears prick her eyes at his simple kindness. "Thank you." "Nothing to thank me for." He settled back in his chair, making himself comfortable. "Why do not you try to rest? I will be right here. I promise." Amelia moved to the bed, lying down without undressing beyond removing her shoes, pulling the quilt up to her chin. From where she lay, she could see Tobias silhouetted against the lamplight, a solid presence between her and the door, between her and the darkness beyond. "Tobias," she said softly. "Yes." "Will you tell me more about the stars?" She heard the smile in his voice. "The constellation directly above us right now is called Cygnus, the swan. The Greeks said it was Zeus disguised as a bird, but the way I see it, it is just beautiful without needing a story. See how those stars there form the wings, and that bright one at the center, that is Deneb. It is so far away that the light we see tonight left that star before Columbus ever sailed west." His voice washed over her, steady and calm, describing the night sky she could not see from her bed, but could picture from his words. The Milky Way stretching across the darkness like a river of light. The summer triangle pointing the way north. Cassiopeia and her throne spinning through the seasons. Amelia's eyes grew heavy. The fear that had gripped her all evening began to release its hold, replaced by the warmth of knowing she was not alone. That this kind stranger had given up his own sleep to sit guard over hers. That even in this wild, dangerous place, there were still good people who helped simply because it was right. "Amelia." His voice came softly through the darkness. You are going to be all right here. I know it does not feel like it tonight, but you are stronger than you know." She wanted to respond, to thank him again, but sleep was pulling her down into its depths. The last thing she was aware of was his presence by the door, steadfast and true, a guardian against the fears that had seemed so overwhelming mere hours before. When Amelia woke, golden morning light was streaming through her window, and Tobias was gone. For a moment, she wondered if she had dreamed the entire encounter. But then she saw the chair by the door, positioned exactly where he had sat, and found a small piece of paper on her table weighted down by a smooth river stone. "You slept peacefully," the note read in a neat, confident hand. "See you around town. T." She held the paper close, a smile tugging at her lips despite the exhaustion still clinging to her bones. Her first day in Hangtown, and already everything had changed in ways she could never have anticipated. The next weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Amelia threw herself into preparing the schoolhouse, cleaning years of accumulated dust, organizing the few textbooks available, and planning lessons for students of wildly varying abilities. The children arrived on her first official day with curiosity and energy that bordered on chaos. But she found her footing quickly, discovering that her father's patient teaching methods served her well in this rough frontier classroom. Tobias appeared periodically, always with some reasonable excuse. He brought her a better lamp for evening work, saying it was a spare from his mother. He fixed the loose board on her front step, claiming he was doing repairs at the schoolhouse anyway. He brought her fresh vegetables from his family's garden, insisting they had far too many and they would just go to waste otherwise. Each visit was brief and proper, usually in the early evening when the schoolchildren had gone home and the heat of the day was fading. They would talk on her small porch, carefully maintaining the appearance of respectability, though Amelia found herself watching for his arrival with increasing anticipation. His presence had become a bright spot in her days, a steady rhythm she had begun to rely on without quite realizing it. "You have the Thompson boys figured out yet?" he asked one evening, leaning against the porch railing as the sun painted the mountains gold and purple. "Daniel and James," Amelia laughed. "They tried to put a frog in my desk on day 3. I made them write a 5-page essay on amphibian biology. They have been model students ever since." "Clever," Tobias said, his eyes crinkling with amusement. "Most teachers just use the switch, but making them learn something, that is better." "Violence solves nothing," Amelia said firmly. "Education is the path forward. For individuals and communities both." "You really believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise, what am I doing here?" She smoothed her skirt, watching the last light fade from the sky. "Back in Boston, I tutored children in the poor neighborhoods. Their parents worked in the factories, barely made enough to survive. But they understood that education was the only way their children might have better lives. I saw what a difference it made when someone cared enough to really teach them, not just drill them in rote memorization." Tobias was quiet for a moment, studying her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "This town is lucky to have you." "I am lucky to be here," she admitted, "despite the rough beginning." "About that," he said, shifting his weight. "The men who robbed your stage, we caught them. They are headed to Sacramento for trial. You may be called to testify." Amelia's stomach clenched at the thought of facing those men again, but she lifted her chin. "If that is what's required, then that is what I'll do." "That is what I thought you would say." He smiled, that transformative expression that made him look younger and more carefree. "Would you do me the honor of joining my family for dinner Sunday? My mother has been pestering me to invite you properly. She says it is shameful that the new teacher has been here a month and we have not welcomed you correctly." "I would love that," Amelia said, meaning it more than was probably appropriate. Sunday arrived with crystalline clarity, the sky so blue it hurt to look at. Amelia wore her best dress, a deep green cotton she had carefully pressed, and pinned her dark blonde hair up in a style that felt both respectable and slightly pretty. Tobias arrived to escort her in a small wagon, his own Sunday clothes making him look polished in a way that made her heart skip. The Turner house sat on a rise at the edge of town, a solid wooden structure with a wide porch and a garden bursting with late summer vegetables. Tobias's mother, Margaret, was a slender woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes exactly like her son's. His father, Thomas, was broad-shouldered and weathered, with laugh lines around his eyes and a firm handshake that conveyed both strength and welcome. "Finally," Margaret said, embracing Amelia like they were old friends. "Tobias has told us so much about you. Come in, come in. Dinner is almost ready." The house was warm and lived in, filled with books and comfortable furniture and the smell of roasting chicken. A piano stood in one corner of the main room, sheet music stacked on its polished surface. Photographs lined the walls, capturing moments from the family's life in this demanding land. "You have a beautiful home," Amelia said sincerely. "Thank you, dear. We have worked hard to make it so." Margaret ushered her to the dining table, already set with simple but elegant china. "Tell me, how are you finding our little town? Tobias mentioned there was some trouble when you arrived." Over dinner, Amelia found herself relaxing in a way she had not since leaving Boston. The Turners were easy company, their conversation ranging from town gossip to politics to literature. Thomas had strong opinions about the railroad expansion and its impact on freight companies like his own. Margaret was passionate about music education and lamented the lack of instruments for children who showed talent but whose families could not afford them. That is something we might address through the school, Amelia suggested, warming to the idea. Perhaps we could organize fundraising events, concerts or social gatherings where we charge a small admission and use the funds to purchase instruments that could be lent to students. Margaret's face lit up. What a wonderful idea! We could hold them in the church, and I would be happy to give lessons to any child who wanted to learn. Mother has been wanting to do something like this for years, Tobias said, his voice affectionate. She just needed someone else to be enthusiastic about it. After dinner, Thomas excused himself to check on something at the freight office, and Margaret began clearing dishes despite Amelia's offers to help. Nonsense! You are a guest. Tobias, why do not you show Amelia the garden before the light fades completely? The dahlias are at their peak. It was transparently obvious matchmaking, but Amelia found she did not mind. She followed Tobias out through the back door into a garden that was clearly a labor of love. Vegetables grew in neat rows, and flowers bloomed in every available space, their colors vibrant against the darkening sky. Your mother has a gift, Amelia said, touching the velvet petals of a deep red dahlia. She says gardens are proof that beauty can grow anywhere if you are willing to work for it. Tobias stood close beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cooling evening air. Amelia, I wanted to talk to you about something. Her heart began to race. Yes. That night when you first arrived, when I stayed with you because you were frightened of the dark. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. I have not been able to stop thinking about you since then. About your courage, your kindness, the way you see the world. I know we have not known each other long, and maybe it is too soon to say anything, but I believe in being honest about what I feel. Amelia turned to face him fully, her pulse thundering in her ears. What do you feel? That you are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. That every time I see you, my day gets brighter. That I want to know everything about you, want to hear all your thoughts and dreams and fears. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. I am falling in love with you, Amelia. Maybe I have been since the moment I picked up your mother's locket from the dust and saw the strength in your eyes despite your fear. She could barely breathe. Tobias, I feel it too. This pull toward you. This sense that somehow, despite everything, I ended up exactly where I was meant to be. Can I court you properly? He asked. I know people will talk, might say it is too fast, but I do not care about that. I just want the chance to show you how much you mean to me. Yes, she whispered. Yes, please. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. In the fading light, with the mountains dark against the star-filled sky, Amelia felt something slot into place in her heart. This was right. He was right. Everything that had led her here, all the loss and fear and desperate choices, had brought her to this moment, to this man. Over the following months, Tobias courted her with a patience and attentiveness that made her feel cherished in ways she had never experienced. He brought her wildflowers he picked during his rides through the foothills. He taught her to ride a horse, his hand steady at her waist as he helped her mount, his voice encouraging as she found her balance. He introduced her to his friends and colleagues, making it clear through word and action that she was important to him, that he was proud to be seen with her. The town watched their courtship with interest and approval. Margaret Turner was beloved, and her endorsement of Amelia carried weight. The fact that the new teacher was not only good at her job, but also kind and involved in the community, helped smooth any concerns about propriety. When Amelia organized a Christmas concert featuring the schoolchildren and raising funds for instruments, the entire town turned out, packing the church to capacity. Winter in the Sierra Nevada foothills was nothing like the winters Amelia had known in Boston. The air was crisp and clear, the occasional snow melting quickly under the strong sun. She grew to love this place, its rough edges and stunning beauty, the way people helped each other without question because survival often depended on community. But the darkness still frightened her. Even months into her time in Hangtown, even with Tobias a constant presence in her life, the nights when he was not there left her anxious and restless. She tried to hide it, ashamed of what felt like childish weakness, but he always seemed to know. On the nights when his work took him out of town, he made sure someone checked on her. His mother would invite her for dinner and insist she stay over in their guest room. Mrs. Patterson would appear with some excuse to visit. The sheriff's deputy would make extra rounds past the schoolhouse, tipping his hat if he saw her lamplight burning. "You told them," Amelia said one evening, not quite accusing but not entirely comfortable either. "I told my mother you sometimes have trouble sleeping," Tobias admitted. "She has experience with that, remember, and she cares about you, Amelia. They all do. There is no shame in accepting help." "I should be over this by now," she said quietly. "It has been months. Fear does not work on a schedule." He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers in the familiar gesture that had become their own. "You will get there in your own time, and until then I will stay awake with you whenever you need me to." In April of 1873, nearly a year after her arrival, Tobias proposed. He did it simply, without grand gestures, in the schoolhouse garden where Amelia had planted flowers with her students. He knelt in the dirt between the young shoots and asked her to be his wife, his sage eyes full of love and hope and certainty. "I cannot promise you an easy life," he said, holding a simple gold band. "This country is hard and there will be challenges. But I can promise you that I will love you every day, that I will be there through whatever comes, that I will stay awake through your darkest nights and celebrate your brightest days. Will you marry me?" Amelia pulled him to his feet and kissed him, not caring that students might see that propriety demanded more reserve. "Yes," she said against his lips. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married in late May when the wildflowers covered the hillsides in carpets of gold and purple and white. The church overflowed with townspeople who had come to consider Amelia one of their own. Margaret played the piano, filling the small space with music that made Amelia's heart soar. Thomas gave her away, having insisted on the honor when she mentioned having no family present. She wore a dress of cream silk that Margaret had helped her sew, with wildflowers woven into her hair. Tobias wore a new suit, though he kept his worn boots because, as he said, a man should meet his bride in shoes that had carried him through life honestly. When the minister pronounced them married, the kiss they shared was tender and full of promise. The Turners had prepared their old house for the newlyweds, insisting they wanted something smaller anyway and moving to a cottage closer to town. Amelia walked into her new home on her wedding night feeling like she was stepping into a dream. The main room with its piano, the kitchen with the big stove, the bedroom upstairs with windows facing the mountains. As the sun set and darkness fell, familiar anxiety began to creep in. Amelia tried to hide it, busying herself with unpacking the few items she had brought from the teacher's quarters. But Tobias, already attuned to her moods, came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "I am here," he murmured against her hair. "I am not going anywhere." "I know," she whispered. "I just hate that this still affects me, on our wedding night of all nights. Hey." He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You whispered you were afraid of the dark, and I stayed awake and held your hand. That was how this started, remember?" "Nothing about you frightens me away, Amelia, not your fears, not anything." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "How did I get so lucky? I ask myself that every day." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. Come on, let me show you something. He led her upstairs to the bedroom, but instead of the bed, he took her to the window. The sky was cloudless, stars beginning to appear in the deepening blue. Tonight, we are going to stay up together, he said. Not because you are afraid, but because I want to show you how beautiful the darkness can be. Will you trust me? She nodded, letting him guide her to sit by the window. They opened it wide, letting in the cool night air and the sounds of the evening. Crickets chirped in the grass. An owl called from the pine trees. And slowly, as full darkness fell, the stars emerged in their countless thousands. Tobias pointed them out one by one, the constellations they had talked about that very first night. But now there was no fear, no desperate need for distraction. Just his warm presence beside her, his arm around her shoulders, and the infinite beauty of the universe spread out above them. When I am with you, the darkness does not feel so heavy, Amelia said softly. Good, because I plan to be with you for the rest of my life. He kissed her temple. We will face every night together, Amelia. The dark ones and the bright ones. And eventually, maybe you will come to see the darkness not as something to fear, but as the canvas that lets the stars shine. They made love for the first time that night with the stars watching, tender and careful with each other, learning the language of each other's bodies in the safety of their mutual devotion. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Amelia felt something shift deep inside her. The fear that had gripped her for so long loosened its hold just a fraction more. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. I love you too, Tobias replied, his voice rumbling in his chest beneath her ear. Sleep, my love. I will be here when you wake. And she did sleep, deeply and peacefully, with no nightmares to trouble her rest. The years that followed were full and rich. Amelia continued teaching, her classroom becoming known throughout the region for its innovative methods and the way her students thrived. The music program she and Margaret started grew beyond their wildest hopes, and soon children throughout Hangtown had access to instruments and lessons. Some of her students went on to university, a rare achievement that filled her with fierce pride. Tobias took over more of his father's freight business as Thomas aged, building it into one of the most respected operations in the Sierra Nevada region. His reputation for fairness and reliability brought steady work, and the business prospered. Together, he and Amelia became pillars of the community, the couple people turned to when help was needed or advice sought. Their first child arrived in the spring of 1874, a son they named Thomas James Turner after both his grandfathers. Amelia had been terrified of childbirth, of the darkness of pain and the unknown, but Tobias stayed with her through every moment, ignoring the midwife's protests that birthing rooms were no place for men. He held her hand and whispered encouragement and refused to leave her side. You can do this, he told her during the worst of the labor. You are the strongest person I know, Amelia. You crossed a continent alone. You faced down your fears. You can do this too. When Thomas was finally born, red-faced and squalling, Tobias cried as he held him for the first time. He is perfect, he kept saying. You are perfect. Thank you. 2 years later, a daughter arrived whom they named Margaret Ann after both grandmothers. And 3 years after that, another son, Henry David, who came into the world with remarkable ease compared to his siblings. Their home filled with the chaos of children, with laughter and tears, and the endless demands of young lives. Amelia found, to her surprise, that the children helped with the darkness. When Henry woke crying in the night, she would walk the floor with him, and the darkness felt less oppressive with his small weight in her arms. When Margaret had nightmares, Amelia would light a candle and tell her stories until she drifted back to sleep, and in being the strong one, she found her own strength growing. But still, On the nights when Tobias was away, the old fear would creep back. And still, he always made sure she was not alone, always arranged for company or came home earlier than planned. It became a running joke between them, affectionate and understood. "My husband who guards me against the dark," she would tease. "My wife who brought light into my life," he would reply, kissing her until she forgot whatever she had been saying. In 1879, tragedy struck when Margaret Turner Sr. died suddenly of a heart ailment. The entire town mourned, but none more than Amelia, who had come to love her mother-in-law deeply. At the funeral, Amelia held Tobias as he wept, strong for him the way he had been strong for her so many times. Thomas Sr. followed his wife less than a year later, and Tobias inherited the freight business fully. "They loved each other so much," Tobias said one night, standing at the bedroom window where they had spent their wedding night watching stars. 53 years together. "That is what I want with you, Amelia. 50 years and more." "Then we had better take good care of each other," she replied, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "I plan to hold you to that promise." The 1880s brought changes to Hangtown and the wider country. The railroad reached closer, bringing more people west, changing the economy and pace of life. The freight business adapted, focusing on routes the trains could not reach, maintaining profitability through flexibility and reputation. The school expanded, requiring additional teachers, and Amelia found herself training younger women to take on classrooms while she focused on administration and curriculum development. Their children grew. Thomas proved to have his father's steady nature and head for business. Margaret inherited her grandmother's musical talent and her mother's passion for teaching. Henry was the wild one, always climbing trees and coming home with scraped knees and stories of adventures in the foothills. "He is going to make me gray before my time," Tobias complained good-naturedly after Henry fell out of a tree and broke his arm at age 9. "He is yours through and through," Amelia countered. "You probably did the exact same things at his age." "Absolutely not," Tobias said with mock indignation. Then he paused. "Well, there was the time I tried to ride a half-wild Mustang on a dare and broke my collarbone, and when I climbed onto the church roof to retrieve a kite and got stuck. And the incident with the bull and the 'I rest my case,'" Amelia laughed. By 1890, they had been married 17 years. Thomas was 16 and courting Sarah Langley, the banker's daughter, with the kind of serious intensity that made both his parents hide smiles. Margaret, at 14, was talking about going to San Francisco to study music at a conservatory. Henry, at 11, was still more interested in exploring the mountains than sitting still for lessons. It was a cool October evening, and Amelia sat on their porch watching the sun set over the familiar mountains. The town had grown around them, streets that had been dusty paths now bordered by proper houses and businesses. The schoolhouse had been expanded twice. A railroad spur had finally been built, bringing easier connection to Sacramento and the wider world. Tobias came out to join her, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. They sat in comfortable silence, a peace built on years of shared life, of weathering storms and celebrating joys together. "Do you ever think about that first night?" Amelia asked. "When I was so scared of the darkness that you stayed up until dawn with me, all the time," Tobias admitted. "It was the night I knew I would marry you if you would have me. Something about the trust you showed, letting me stay even though you barely knew me, the honesty about your fear, it touched something in me I did not know was there. I have gotten better with the darkness over the years," she said softly, "but I still do not like it when you are away, I know." He took her hand, the gesture as natural as breathing after so many years, And I still make sure you are not alone when I have to be gone. That has not changed. Do you think it ever will? She was not sure if she wanted it to or not. Maybe. Maybe not. Does it matter? He looked at her with those sage eyes that still made her heart skip. I made you a promise on our wedding night, Amelia, that I would stay awake through your darkest nights. That promise does not have an expiration date. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steadiness that had been her anchor for nearly 2 decades. What did I do to deserve you? You were brave enough to come west, to start over, to let yourself be loved despite your fears. He kissed the top of her head. You gave me everything I did not know I was looking for. That night, lying in bed with the window open to the October air, Amelia found herself wide awake even though she was exhausted. Tobias, sensing her restlessness, propped himself up on one elbow. Cannot sleep, just thinking. About how much has changed since I arrived here, about the life we have built. She turned to face him in the darkness. Do you remember what you said to me that first night, about your mother learning to see the stars instead of focusing on the darkness? I remember. I think I finally understand what you meant. The darkness does not go away. It is still there, still vast and sometimes frightening. But when you focus on the light, on the beautiful things that exist within it, the fear loses its power. She reached out to touch his face. You have been my light, Tobias. All these years you have been the constant that made everything else possible. He caught her hand, pressing it to his lips. And you have been mine. Every single day, Amelia, even the hard ones. They made love slowly, a familiar dance they had perfected over years of practice, knowing exactly how to bring each other pleasure, how to comfort and excite. Afterward, Tobias held her close, her back pressed to his chest, his arm secure around her waist. Tobias. She whispered into the darkness. Thank you for staying awake with me for all these years. Always, he murmured against her hair. Always, my love. She drifted toward sleep, safe and warm, no longer afraid of what lurked in the darkness beyond their window. Because she had learned what he had tried to teach her that very first night. That the darkness was just space between the stars, just the quiet canvas that let the bright moments stand out in sharp relief. The years continued to pass, bringing their share of joys and sorrows. They became grandparents when Thomas married Sarah in 1894, and their first grandchild, a girl named Amelia Rose, was born the following year. Margaret did go to San Francisco to study music, returning home 2 years later with a fiancé, a gentle pianist named David Chen, whose Chinese immigrant parents had built a successful import business. The marriage caused some talk in Hangtown, but Tobias and Amelia stood firm in their support, and their standing in the community helped smooth the way. The wedding was beautiful, held in the same church where they had married, and Margaret's radiant happiness silenced most of the critics. Henry, true to form, surprised everyone by discovering a talent for writing. He began contributing articles to the Sacramento newspaper about life in the mining towns, eventually moving to San Francisco to work as a journalist. He sent letters home regularly, full of observations and stories that made Amelia laugh and cry in equal measure. All 3 of them happy and settled, Amelia said to Tobias one evening in 1898 as they sat on their porch in the cooling twilight. Did we do all right? We did better than all right, Tobias assured her. They are good people, kind and strong and ready to face whatever comes. What more could we ask for? Nothing, she admitted. Nothing at all. They were in their 50s now, their hair graying, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and full lives. But the love between them had only deepened, tempered by time into something that felt unbreakable. They had weathered financial difficulties when the freight business struggled in the late 1890s. They had survived health scares, including a bout of pneumonia that nearly took Tobias in the winter of 1896. When Amelia sat by his bedside for 3 days straight, refusing to sleep until the fever broke. "You stayed awake for me," she had told him when he finally regained consciousness, her voice hoarse with exhaustion and relief. "It was my turn." The 20th century arrived with great fanfare and speculation about what the new era would bring. Hangtown, officially renamed Placerville by the state in 1854, but still called Hangtown by many old-timers, had transformed from a rough mining camp into a proper town with brick buildings, electric lights on the main street, and a high school in addition to the elementary school Amelia had taught in for so long. She had retired from regular teaching in 1899, though she still worked with the school board and tutored students who needed extra help. Tobias had handed over day-to-day management of the freight business to Thomas, though he still went into the office most days and consulted on major decisions. They had earned their rest, their community agreed, though neither of them seemed content to sit still. In the summer of 1902, they took a trip that had been 30 years in the making. Amelia wanted to return to Boston, to see what had become of the city she had left behind, to visit her father's grave, and to introduce Tobias to the places that had shaped her early life. The train journey east was comfortable in ways that would have been unimaginable during Amelia's first trip west. Sleeping berths and dining cars, smooth rails and reliable schedules. They held hands like newlyweds as they watched the country pass outside their window, the vastness and variety of the land still capable of inspiring awe. Boston had changed dramatically. The city had grown, modernized, become something almost unrecognizable from Amelia's memories. But the cemetery where her father was buried remained peaceful and well-maintained. She stood before his headstone, Tobias's steady presence beside her, and told her father about the life she had built, the family she had raised, the love she had found in the wild country he had never seen. "Thank you," she whispered to the stone, "for teaching me to be brave enough to start over. I hope you would be proud of what I have made of myself." "He would be," Tobias said quietly. "How could he not be?" They spent a week in Boston, visiting museums and concerts, eating in fine restaurants and walking the streets of Amelia's childhood. But by the end of the week, they were both ready to go home. California had claimed them both, become part of their very bones. "It is beautiful here," Amelia said as their train pulled out of the station, heading west. "But it does not feel like home anymore. Home is mountains and pine trees and the way the light hits the dust on Main Street." "Home is where you are," Tobias corrected gently. "The rest is just scenery." They returned to Hangtown in late August to find that their granddaughter Amelia Rose, now 7, had been asking for them daily. Their grandson, Thomas, and Sarah's son George, had learned to walk while they were gone. Margaret was pregnant with her first child, glowing with anticipation. Henry had gotten engaged to a fellow journalist named Rebecca, a woman whose fierce intelligence and kind heart had captured his wandering soul. Life continued its steady rhythm. Winters and summers, births and deaths, the small daily moments that accumulated into a lifetime. Amelia and Tobias grew old together, their bodies slowing but their minds sharp, their love unwavering. In 1910, on their 37th wedding anniversary, Tobias planned a surprise. He had kept it secret for weeks, enlisting Margaret's help to execute the details. When the evening arrived, he led Amelia out to the wagon, which was equipped with blankets and pillows, and drove them up into the foothills to a spot overlooking the valley. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold and purple. As darkness fell, he helped her into the wagon bed, settling her comfortably against the pillows, then climbed in beside her. "What are we doing?" she asked, though she suspected she knew. "Watching the stars," he said simply. "Like we did on our wedding night, do you remember?" "I remember everything about that night." She nestled against him, pulling a blanket over them both. "You told me darkness was just the canvas that lets the stars shine." "And have I been right?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of teasing. She considered, watching as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue. "Yes, you have been right about most things, frustrating as that is to admit," he laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Only most things. You were wrong about Henry settling down before he was 30. He was 32. She smiled. "And you were wrong when you said I would get tired of teaching after a few years." "Fair points," he conceded, "but I was right about the most important thing." "What was that?" "That you were the woman I wanted to spend my life with, that we would build something beautiful together." He kissed her temple. "That even your fears would become part of our story, something that brought us closer rather than drove us apart." Amelia felt tears prick her eyes, the good kind, the kind that came from overwhelming emotion rather than sadness. "I used to be so ashamed of being afraid. Thought it made me weak. It made you human. It gave me the chance to be there for you." He held her closer. "You whispered you were afraid of the dark, and I stayed awake and held your hand. Best decision I ever made." They lay together under the vast canopy of stars, the same stars that had watched over their first night together, that had witnessed every year of their marriage. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of light. Cygnus, the swan, flew eternal overhead. The summer triangle pointed true north, constant and reliable. "Look," Tobias said softly, pointing. "A shooting star, make a wish." Amelia watched the brief streak of light arc across the darkness and realized she had nothing to wish for. Everything she had ever wanted, everything she had not known enough to want, had already been given to her. This man beside her, the family they had raised, the life they had built from nothing but determination and love. "I do not need to wish," she said. "I have everything already." "Me too," Tobias agreed. "Me too, my love." They stayed there for hours, talking and laughing and remembering, until the night grew cold enough that even the blankets could not keep them warm. Tobias drove them home through the darkness, the horses knowing the way without much guidance, and helped Amelia inside their house, their home of nearly 4 decades. In their bedroom, the familiar room where they had loved and fought and made up and raised children and grown old together, they undressed slowly and climbed into bed. Tobias pulled Amelia close, her favorite position, with her back to his chest, his arm secure around her waist. "Still afraid of the dark?" he murmured against her hair. She thought about it honestly. "Sometimes, just a little. Old fears do not die easily." "Then I will stay awake with you," he said, the same promise he had made 38 years ago, the same promise he had kept through all the years between. "You do not have to," she protested softly. "I am all right. I know you are, but I want to. I will always want to." He kissed the nape of her neck, tender and familiar. "Go to sleep, Amelia. I am here. I will always be here." And she did sleep, peacefully and deeply, with no dreams to trouble her rest. Because she had learned the greatest lesson of all. That love was the light that banished darkness, that made fears manageable, that transformed a lonely woman afraid of the dark into someone strong enough to build a life in the wilderness. Tobias stayed awake for a while longer, listening to the soft rhythm of his wife's breathing, feeling the rise and fall of her chest beneath his arm. He thought about the frightened young woman he had found that first day, dragged from a stagecoach and robbed of everything she owned. He thought about how she had transformed this town, educated generations of children, made their house a home filled with love and laughter. He thought about how lucky he was to have found her, To have been there at exactly the right moment to help her. To have been given the privilege of loving her for all these years. Through the bedroom window, the stars shone bright and clear, eternal witnesses to the small human dramas playing out below. And in that quiet house on the edge of Hangtown, California, a cowboy kept his promise to the woman he loved, staying awake to guard her sleep, to hold her close, to be her steady light in whatever darkness remained. They lived many more years together, Tobias and Amelia, growing old with grace and dignity, surrounded by children and grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. They celebrated 50 years of marriage in 1923, a milestone that the entire town turned out to honor. By then, Hangtown had transformed yet again, automobiles replacing horses on many streets, electricity and indoor plumbing standard rather than luxury. But some things never changed. The mountains still rose against the sky. The stars still shone in their ancient patterns. And every night, Tobias and Amelia lay down together, his arm around her waist, his whispered assurance that he was there, that she was safe, that they would face whatever came together. When Tobias passed away in the winter of 1928 at the age of 82, peacefully in his sleep with Amelia beside him, the town mourned a man who had been its backbone for more than half a century. But none mourned him more than Amelia, who had lost her partner, her love, her guardian against the darkness. That first night without him was the hardest she had ever faced. The darkness pressed in, suffocating and absolute, and she lay in their bed unable to sleep, unable to even close her eyes. Her children wanted to stay with her, but she had sent them home to their own families, insisting she would be all right. But she was not all right. She was shattered, bereft, lost without the man who had been her compass for 56 years. As midnight approached, Amelia rose from the bed and walked to the window, the same window where they had watched stars on their wedding night and countless nights after. The sky was clear, the stars bright, and as she stared up at them, something shifted in her chest. She was not alone. Tobias was gone, yes, but everything he had taught her, every moment they had shared, every lesson about courage and love and facing fear remained. He had given her the tools to stand on her own, had loved her so completely that even his absence could not shake the foundation they had built together. "Thank you," she whispered to the stars, to his memory, to the universe that had given her such a gift. "Thank you for staying awake with me, for holding my hand through the darkness, for showing me that I was stronger than I knew." And though the tears came then, hot and heavy, streaming down her weathered face, they were not just tears of grief. They were gratitude and love and recognition of a life beautifully lived, of a love that had transformed everything it touched. Amelia lived another 7 years, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1935 at the age of 85. Her children and grandchildren gathered to lay her to rest beside Tobias in the Hangtown Cemetery, under the shade of ancient oak trees with a view of the mountains they had both loved. The inscription on their shared headstone was simple, chosen by their daughter Margaret, who remembered the story her parents had told her about the night they met. She whispered she was afraid of the dark. He stayed awake and held her hand. Together, they found the light. And in that small cemetery in the Sierra Nevada foothills, under stars that had witnessed the full arc of their extraordinary love story, Tobias Turner and Amelia Laurent Turner rested together at last, their journey complete, their love eternal, their story a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and holding tight to the one you love through every darkness.